The energy crisis is over. We survived. Gas storage across Europe hit record levels. Wholesale prices have plummeted, falling nearly 70% from their peak. The massive build-out of new liquefied natural gas terminals is complete, and they are running. Winter passed without blackouts. So, if you live in Europe, you might be asking, why is my energy bill still so high? It did not go back down. It stayed high. Not crisis high, thankfully, but permanently higher than before the crisis. This isn't a temporary shock anymore. This is the new floor. And here is the crucial point. This is no longer about Russia. It is not about the war in Ukraine, and it is certainly not about shortages. Those were valid explanations for 2022 and 2023. They do not explain what is happening now. The gas is flowing again. The grid didn't collapse. Supply returned. But prices did not fall back. Energy prices, unlike general inflation, don't just spike and fade. They reset. They find a new higher level, and they stick there. The real question isn't what happened during the crisis. Everyone covered that story. The question is why prices did not fall back down when the crisis definitively ended. The answer is not in the daily news cycle. It is in the fundamental structure of the European energy system. Once a system is redesigned for scarcity, cheap energy becomes structurally impossible, even when supply returns. Europe didn't just survive an energy shock. It completely rebuilt its entire energy system in the middle of one. That rebuilding locked in costs that simply do not disappear when the emergency ends. You can't unbuild an LNG terminal. The system that emerged on the other side is permanently more expensive to run. Europe used to price energy based on abundance. Think of cheap pipeline gas, nuclear plants that were paid off decades ago, and slow coal phase-outs. Electricity prices reflected operating costs. That world is gone. Today, Europe prices energy at the margin. This means the single most expensive source needed to meet demand sets the price for everyone else. If gas plants are the very last ones turned on to keep the lights on, then gas sets the price for all electricity, even if 80% of your power came from cheap wind, solar, or nuclear. This isn't new economics. This is how power markets have always worked. But it didn't matter when the margin was cheap. Now the margin is expensive, and it is staying expensive because the cheapest, stable sources are no longer sufficient to meet total demand. Europe didn't just lose cheap energy, it rewired how energy is priced. This isn't just about ideology, it is fundamentally about physics. You cannot run a massive industrial economy on weather alone. You absolutely need backup power. That backup is still gas. And gas in Europe is now globally priced. It competes with Asian buyers. It is indexed to shipping costs, to storage premiums, and to market volatility. Even when supply is completely adequate, the price floor is higher because the system itself is different. Then there's the timing mismatch. Energy investment cycles take 10 to 15 years. Political cycles take 4 or 5. Prices, however, adjust instantly. You cannot build a nuclear plant before the next election. You couldn't wait a decade for offshore wind when the lights had to stay on this past winter. So, governments made urgent, short-term decisions with massive long-term consequences. They locked in expensive supply contracts. They subsidized imports. They financed emergency infrastructure. Germany, for example, added LNG import capacity faster than any major economy in modern history. That is genuinely impressive. It is also inherently expensive. Those costs did not disappear when the wholesale price of gas fell. They are now permanently embedded. Grid stabilization added yet another layer. As renewables scale up, grids require incredibly complex balancing. Batteries, new interconnectors, frequency control, voltage management, all necessary, but all costly. Backup capacity must be paid to remain available even when the plant is rarely running, just to ensure reliability. LNG terminals must be paid for, whether they are full or idle. Storage mandates require countries to buy gas they may not immediately need. That is insurance, and insurance is never free. Finally, we have the social safety net costs. Energy price caps, social tariffs, and industrial support schemes did not vanish. They have shifted from emergency measures into permanent features. They are recovered through taxes or recovered through network charges. It is a different line item on the budget, but the same consumer is paying. Green energy dramatically reduced fuel costs, but it has permanently increased system costs. Wind and solar are cheap once built, but integrating them is not. The grid becomes more complex, more distributed, and much more expensive to operate. At 20% renewables, the system is manageable. At 50%, it is a fundamentally different machine. Infrastructure costs just do not scale down. The short version, the crisis ended, but the cost of the structural changes remains. For the average European household, this change is immediate and painful. Electricity and gas now absorb roughly 5 to 7% more of your disposable income than they did before the crisis. Think about that for a second. That's 5 to 7% less money available for everything else. This isn't just a monthly annoyance, this is the new structural reality. Every euro you pay today locks in a lifetime of higher costs for your family. That difference compounds over time. It affects where you live, how much you save, and ultimately, whether your income builds wealth or merely maintains stability. And it's not just households that are feeling the squeeze. EU industrial energy costs have jumped dramatically. Many manufacturing sectors are now spending 2 to 3% more of their annual revenue on energy than they did just a couple of years ago. This directly guts their global competitiveness. So where are the gains going? Not to you, the household, not to the small businesses struggling to stay afloat, not to the energy-intensive industry trying to compete globally. The profits flow elsewhere. They flow to utilities that locked in cheap supply years ago. They flow to traders who monetize the constant volatility we see every day. They flow to developers who have guaranteed prices for new energy sources that look modest compared to gas prices, but are extremely generous relative to the actual cost of generation. High prices are no longer a sign of market failure. They have become the financing mechanism for the energy transition itself. And here's the brutal truth. The transition is no longer optional. This means prices won't collapse back to 2019 levels, but they probably won't explode uncontrollably either, because governments learned their lesson during the crisis. Next time, they will intervene faster. They will cap prices sooner. They will subsidize again. That prevents a political or economic blowup, but it also prevents real price discovery. It masks the true cost. Every intervention comes with a cost, and where does that cost end up? On the same balance sheet? Yours. Cheap energy used to be Europe's silent, powerful advantage. That advantage is completely gone. Europe chose price stability for governments over price relief for households. This isn't a moral judgment, it's just a description of the facts on the ground. The infrastructure is locked in. The contracts are signed. The political commitments to renewable targets are fixed. Yes, gas dependence is being managed, but it's not being eliminated overnight. And new nuclear plants? They won't deliver power until the mid-2030s at the earliest. Anything that could significantly lower prices is a decade away. Everything that raised them is already here. Which brings us to the hard conclusion. For most Europeans, this is not temporary inflation. This is a permanent pay cut. So we have to ask the critical question, who is supposed to absorb permanently higher energy costs? Is it the households? Is it the industry? Or is it the state? Because if energy never gets cheap again, this is not just an energy story anymore. This is a story about living standards. This is a story about global competitiveness. And ultimately, that's a story about what middle-class life in Europe is going to look like from here on out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you feel this difference in your monthly budget? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into the changing economic landscape.